finální týden, ředitel CD Projektu. Ta hra běží na PS4, překvapivě dobře, jo a mimochodem Keanu Reeves jí hrál. A líbila se mu. A on pak, když vycházel Matrix, tak v rozhovoru řekne, jo mimochodem Cyberpunk jsem nikdy nehrál. Já nehraju hry. Jak Cyberpunk zachránil sám sebe? 28 minut, to je takový krátký video, takový jako rychlovečka, že jo? Cyberpunk did the impossible. To je 17 minut. Já teď nevím, najednou z toho jsem se dělal jenom na kousek.
One caused, which, I mean, pound for pound.
Jo, to je hodně podobný.
Pound was actually something.
What? Tak to se musím podívat na GameRanks. Jak Cyberpunk 2077 kompletně zachránil svoji situaci?
Cyberpunk 2077 was basically the Hindenburg of video games when it came out. It was a huge disaster that everybody talked about due to its lack of precedent and the severity of the images that were produced about it. But somehow, several years later, it is a well-liked and respected game with very positive reviews, both recently and overall on Steam. How did that happen?
No Man's Sky.
Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanks, how Cyberpunk 2077 did the impossible. So, back before this game came out, the hype was out of control.
Ten hype byl šílený a nepomohlo tomu to, že jako rok vydání si po všech těch letech zvolili covidový rok. Kdy byli všichni doma a měli čas hrát videohry. Takže to bylo jako 2020 vydat hru, to byla free cinkatura.
The expectations for CD Projekt Red's newest game were through the roof. And why would they not be through the roof? These guys knocked it out of the park with The Witcher 3, and Cyberpunk was going to be their most ambitious game yet. To say that people were excited would be a massive understatement.
Tak to ti jebe.
Frothing at the mouth to see this thing. The developers had been really tight-lipped about what was actually in the game, leading to a lot of rampant speculation among the fan base. Like, when devs don't set expectations, especially for games like this, then fans are going to set their own. And when that happens, even the best games need to beware, and Cyberpunk 2077, at least at release, was not one of the best games. It was not even, technically speaking, a good game, a complete game, a game in a condition that could be acceptably released, even in an era where people are used to games launching in a state and getting patched. The game released on December 10th, 2020, to mostly positive reviews. Some reviewers went so far as to call it a contender for the best game ever made, like this infamous review from Windows Central, but that positivity would not last. Players who actually got the final product were not happy. The game was a buggy mess and looked terrible on consoles, and it wasn't actually all that much better on PC. The game was in many ways just flat out broken at launch, extremely rough around the edges. This was not the game that CD Projekt Red had promised us, and players weren't just disappointed, they were angry, and controversies endlessly swirled around this game. Investors sued, consumers put together a class action lawsuit claiming false advertising. Sony literally pulled the game from digital sales.
To, že Sony odstranilo Cyberpunk 2077 na nějakou dobu z PlayStation Storeu a nechali tam takovou obrovskou hromadu před i po Cyberpunku a tomhle debaklu, to doteď jako nepochopím některé ty rozhodnutí. Na druhou stranu, Sony si tohle odstranění a refundy všem PlayStation hráčům zopakujou už tenhle týden u Concordu. Papa, 100 milionů od Sony, papa.
And actually, Xbox put a giant warning on the game's store page, warning players about the game's buggy state. CD Projekt Red had data stolen and ransomed. A reviewer actually suffered a seizure from watching one of the brain dance sequences in the...
Vole, to je pravda, no. Tam jako ty původní Braindance, tam blikají takhle ty dvě světla a frajer, jako to, někdo z toho dostal záchvat.
The game. There was actually a
původní, když jsem to hrál já, tak tam bylo, no. A pečnuli to až myslím, že druhý den.
Originally no epilepsy warning in the game, which is kind of shocking because those are
část.
not new. Like the whole thing was just bad news on top of bad news on top of bad news. The inevitable Jason Schreier expose painted a picture of a studio in crisis. In those first few months after the game came out, it seemed like there was no future for the company or the game. It was just one disaster after another. Sure, they promised to do right and make updates to the game, but I mean, how often do developers follow through on that? Consumer expectations are low for this kind of a thing, and for a reason. Somebody who would develop and release a game in this state for that price without saying anything, literally just allowing a big hype train to sell millions of copies of their game. It doesn't seem honest, and, you know, it's happened a lot of times before. And it took a while, but now, just about 3 years after launch, I think we can safely say they managed to do the impossible. They took a game with a reputation that was unsalvageable and turned it around. For a long time, Cyberpunk was the punching bag of the gaming media, the easiest of easy targets, and you can see it anywhere. Look up any random listicle from about 20...
Já jsem neměl tyhle pocity, ale to je tím, že já jsem hrál prostě na PC a ne ty vole na 8 let starý konzoli, že jo. No dobře, v té době bylo PS4, kolik? 7 let? 6 let, řekněme. No prostě nehrál jsem to na více jak půl dekády starý konzoli za pár litrů a PC, jako byla tam hromada chyb, neběželo to dobře, ale tak jsem si jako užil ten příběh, tu atmosféru, ten soundtrack a ty silný postavy, že to prostě, ten technický stav byl jako nějaký perky byly na gameplayově, to nebylo takový, jaký jsem doufal nebo myslel, že to bude, nebo si to sliboval. A primárně, a to jsem říkal, když jsme hráli minulý rok, tu Cyberpunk vlastně tu 2.0 verzi po 3 letech, kdy jsem se toho bál, primárně můj největší problém se Cyberpunkem bylo, že ty se na tu hru od základky hypuješ. Od toho prvního oznámení, nebo od začátku střední. A ona, když pak konečně vyjde, tak ona vyjde v nejhorším období tvýho dospělého života. To znamená, že i kdyby ta hra, vlastně v ten prosinec 2020, vyšla ve stejném stavu, jako je teď po 3 letech, já si stejně neužiju, protože jsem nebyl mentálně, primárně, ve stavu, kdybych si byl schopný užít cokoliv. Naopak by to podle mě uškodilo, protože ta hra by byla boží a já bych i tak prostě z toho měl nulový enjoyment.
2021, and you'll see the writer included catty dig at the game's expense because it was a safe joke to make. And this includes your old pal Falcon the Game Bird and everybody else at Game Ranks. I'm not saying that to say that we were wrong. In fact, it deserved it. It was generally assumed to be a failure because of how bad it was. Thankfully, looking back, they were actually serious about fixing the game, but it did take a while because, you know, it was like that. It was, you know, like that. Like what you can see on the screen right now. That's not like fix it in a couple of days broken. A lot of other publishers and developers wouldn't even bother. They would just write the game off and move on to their next project, hoping that it turns out better. But CD Projekt Red knew that there was more than that writing on this. They recognized that if they were going to remain a successful company, they needed to turn this game around and restore consumer trust in their brand. It's a playback they've gone back to many times, actually, but the stakes have never been this high. Like, if you remember the original Witcher game when it came out back in 2007, to call it rough would be a kind way of putting it.
Wow. Game Ranks, jako mám vás rád. Ale dávejte si bacha, co teď říkáte. Protože se tady bavíme o absolutní klasice s naprosto zásadním českým dubbingem.
It wasn't the mess that Cyberpunk was at release, but it was pretty bad, and the translation was awkward as hell. So in 2008, 1 year later, they revamped the game with Witcher Enhanced Edition.
On mluví o tomhle, to má pravdu. 2007 verze Zaklínače na mojí 512 mega ramce, dobře, otcový. Ty vole, každý dveře 2 až 3 minuty loading. Absolutní rakec. Vydali tu Enhanced edici po roce, jako to 2008, kámoši měl, nainstaloval jsem tu a až s touhle edicí jsem dohrál poprvé Zaklínače 1. 2007, já jsem nikdy nedohrál Zaklínače v roce, kdy vyšel 2007 a to jsem si ho kupoval za 1000 korun českých. V roce 2007, kdy mi bylo 11 let, vzal jsem všechny peníze z Vánoc, vzal jsem všechny peníze z narozenin, vzal jsem všechny peníze ze svátků, koupil jsem si Zaklínače, byla to moje první AAA hra, kterou jsem koupil v den vydání za 1000 korun českých. Tu krásnou fyzickou edici, ty vole, s tím průvodcem, manuálem, mapou, se vším takhle s tím. A nedohrál jsem, i tak jsem ji nedohrál. I když mě to stálo, i když mě to prostě stálo 2-3 měsíce, ty vole, kapesnýho a všeho a tohle z toho. No 4 vlastně, jako šetření. Protože se to tak dlouho loadovalo, tak strašně zdlouhavý to bylo to hrát, že jsem radši šel hrát Modern Warfare, Bioshock a další věci, co vyšly 2007.
Which fixed a lot of issues that the players had with a free update and did a lot to make the game better, and that translated to improved sales. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been able to make Witcher 2 and certainly not Witcher 3, which, by the way, Witcher 3 also had issues at release. From bugs to a downgrading scandal. I would not say it caused the kind of controversy that Cyberpunk 2077.
To už se jako málo lidí pamatuje, ale Zaklínač 3 jsem ho hrál day one, já jsem na tom strávil ty vole během prvního týdne, co ta hra vyšla, já jsem na ní strávil prostě 100 hodin za první týden. Ale ta hra nevyšla optimálně, fakt jako ne. Když se podíváš na můj let's play Zaklínače 3, na tu epizodu, co tam je 19. května 2015, a pak se podíváš třeba na epizodu, co vyšla v srpnu 2015, tak uvidíš, že tam je jinačí inventář, je tam jinačí ovládání a že jako prostě opravdu tam je vidět, že s tou hrou hejbali a bylo tam furt nějaký patch, ty první třeba 3-4 měsíce. Páťo, děkuju, ty blázne, dík moc.
27 did. Honestly, not even the controversy that Witcher 1 caused, which, I mean, pound for pound, was actually something. It's not like Witcher was as big a game as Cyberpunk 2077, so not as many people were paying attention, but this isn't CD Projekt Red's first revamp rodeo, is what I'm saying. Now, the thing about Cyberpunk 2077 is that, while the zeitgeist around the game was extremely negative in 2020, it did still have its fans. With a game this size, it's just inevitable that among the haters there are also going to be defenders. It's highly anticipated. People have both emotionally and monetarily invested time and money into it.
3 kolektorky, 8 let čekání.
It's not an attempt at something. It's easy to say that the complaining around the game was hyperbolic at the time, because some was. That's just inevitable when you get into games discourse, but the game had serious problems too. Now, the state of Cyberpunk 2077 on consoles was abysmal. There's no way around it. The decision to release the game for PS4 and Xbox One without a next-gen update was a boneheaded move. Like, they should have just delayed it. On PS4, the game was horribly ugly at times, and the bugs were non-stop. Low-res textures were very common. There was constant stuttering. Character models would get screwed up. Cutscenes would play wrong. You couldn't play the game for more than 2 minutes without encountering a visual bug of some kind. Gameplay also was seen as a disappointment. The shooting was solid, but the skill tree was confusing and unsatisfying. The enemy AI was just worthless, plain bad crap. Just crap. Honestly, many open world features people have come to expect also just weren't there at launch. The world felt lifeless because there was no real reactivity. There was barely any police response at times. The world was stuffed with boring points of interest without much to do of any substance, and the armor system made it so that everybody had to dress like a clown. Driving wasn't a lot of fun either. Cars were stiff to control. They were
přesně ten transmog armor, že si nemohl mít nějaký outfit a bral si to s nejlepšíma statama, tak si vypadal jak totální kokot, protože prostě to padalo na random věci.
Everything gameplay related just felt off. Now, there was a solid core, at very least. Night City was one of the best designed open world cities ever, and each district just felt totally unique and visually interesting. The story was solid as well, even if there were definitely too many scenes of people just talking without a lot else going on. It was a game that could conceivably be...
To jako jo, ale Red Dead Redemption 2 má hádej co? Fakt hodně scén, kde se postavy jenom baví. Ne, pardon, jedou z bodu A do bodu B, fakt dlouhou cestu na koních nebo do stavníků a baví se mezi sebou. A je to jedna z nejlepších her posledních 10 let. A ten Cyberpunk je podobný, jasně, je tam hodně ty věcí, kde se jako jenom takhle baví ty dvě postavy. Nicméně ty rozhovory s těma obličejema a interiérama třeba v autech z toho dělají jedny z nejlepších videoherních rozhovorů prostě za posledních zase 5-10 let. Prostě ty si jenom jedeš někam s penem a bavíš se s penem. Ty vole, já myslím, že se když jsem to viděl, když jsme to hráli minulý rok, před rokem, tu 2.0, jak tam je ta mise, ta dělová linka s tou penem a ona sedí na tom baru a baví se ty vole s tebou z očí do očí. A teď tam hraje s tou láhví, teď se tam občas napije, teď na tebe jako sáhne, teď vidíš ty vole, že reaguje ten její obličej, ty oči, ty vole, jako ta pusa na to, co ty jako říkáš, jo. To je, jako, když to porovnáš s mimikou jistý AAA hry, jako třeba, já nevím, Star Wars Outlaws, to je prostě, to je jak kdyby to byl, jako, to je jak kdyby to reálně byla nějaká indie hra za 10 euro versus ty vole AAA prostě release, jo. To je jako neuvěřitelný, jaký neskutečný rozdíl tam je, to samý Starfield. Takže ano, je tady hodně jako částí Cyberpunku, kde se jenom postavy bavěj, ale ty většina těch hlavních postav a ty jejich linky, ty postavy jsou fakt živý a ty interiéry, ve kterých se baví, jsou neskutečný.
Fixed, but it took a long time. The game saw a lot of small updates and bug fixes for the first few months, but the first major overhaul patch took way longer to come out. Like, the game didn't start seeing significant improvements until 2022. In February, they put out the next-gen upgrade on consoles that gave the game enhanced graphics,
to jsem zvažoval poprvé, že to zahraju znova, ale neměl jsem na to ještě.
It was free, and obviously it should have been. And the response, at least what I saw, was tepidly positive, which is saying a lot, actually. It sounds like I'm saying very little, but when you talk about a game that was as constantly ripped on as Cyberpunk 2077, saying that the
to lhaní tam bylo šílený před tím vydáním. To byl šílený rok, zakončený šíleným hypem a šíleným lhaním. Ale finální týden, ředitel CD Projektu. Ta hra běží na PS4, překvapivě dobře, jo a mimochodem Keanu Reeves jí hrál. A líbila se mu. A on pak, když vycházel Matrix, tak v rozhovoru řekne, jo mimochodem Cyberpunk jsem nikdy nehrál. Já nehraju hry.
Response to something related to it was tepidly positive is actually major. But even so, that wasn't really what changed the attitude around the game. Something entirely different did. Originally announced back in June 2020, months before the final game of Cyberpunk even came out. A collaboration between CD Projekt and Studio Trigger, the anime studio responsible for stuff like Little Witch Academia, SSS Gridman, Promare, Kill la Kill, the list goes on. The show didn't even come out until mid-2022, but it ended up being perfect timing for the developers because it came out when opinions were just starting to turn. So there was actually some real interest in this Netflix adaptation, and yeah, Studio Trigger can be kind of hit or miss with their shows, but this one was a hit. It got great reviews all around and an overall positive audience reception, and a lot of people consider it one of the best video game adaptations of all time. And I don't think it can be understated just how much this show did for Cyberpunk 2077. Like, it turned a lot of people around on the game and on the setting. It's a solid anime. Like, it's actually really good and does a whole lot to expand the setting. And as far as video game media goes, we're used to, like, good games getting bad adaptions, and this was a huge anomaly. A game that people knew as bad got a great adaptation, and it showed the things about the game that were good. And again, in the meantime, CD Projekt...
No lidi už zapomněli, jaký neuvěřitelný filmy nejenom od Uwe Bolla vznikaly na základě videoher. Tak se tenhle srpen rozhodl jim to připomenout pomocí Borderlands.
Had worked on making the game itself good. It did still have its problems, but it was getting better. The same year, September 6, 2022, CD Projekt Red announced their biggest addition to the game yet, an expansion titled Phantom Liberty. And momentum was on their side, but this was going to be the true make it or break it point for the game. These guys are known for some of the best DLC in the business.
True.
Like the add-ons for Witcher 3 had excellent stories, they're huge, and they were cheap. It kind of seemed impossible.
CD Projekt. Jo, hele, my vydáme, prosím vás. My teď jako vydáme DLC, který je velký jako Ubisoft hra, OK, a má úplně kompletně originální story, OK, kompletně originální setting, OK, knižní charaktery, které jsou napsaný dobře, OK, má nový armory, kombat, vinici, všechno tohle, OK. A bude to prostě reálně absolutní pík a zároveň zakončení celé té trilogie, kde na konci budeš brečet, když se Geralt podívá do kamery. OK. No a dáme to za 15 euro. Jako day one, 15 euro. Jakože doslova jako opravdu jako 2 lístky do kina v roce 2015.
Be able to match that quality, but they did. Somehow, the Mad Men did it. Days before that expansion came out, they released the highly anticipated patch 2.0, which overhauled many main aspects of the game. There was an actual wanted level system, police can hunt you, the skill tree is remade from the ground up and becomes much more interesting. How Chrome works was completely changed and also more interesting. Now you can equip a ton of cyberware, but there's a limit depending on your level. Clothing no longer affects armor. You can just wear whatever you want. No more mix and match clown outfits. You're actually allowed to just like try to curate yourself a cool character. You know, what role-playing generally is about. The AI was upgraded, so it's more aggressive, it's more interesting to fight. Net running is more viable, and also just better. Loot's more rare, and also more interesting. I mean, we could just keep repeating that things that could have been interesting became interesting, but enemies scale to your level. The list kind of, it keeps going. In some games, even massive change logs like this one don't actually make the game feel that different, but for Cyberpunk, it feels like a new game, a better game.
Měl bych zmínit nejdůležitější věc, co měla Cyberpunk 2.0. Měla v tom září, kdy to vyšlo, spolu s tím Phantom Liberty, který bylo super, na malou chvíli unikátní snajperku za 2 gifted suby a to za mě byl výborný update.
With 2.0, the devs looked at the game.
Kamo, já si pamatuju, jak to vyšlo do Phantom Liberty. Chápeš to? Jak to vyšlo do Phantom Liberty a teď jakoby byla tahle akce s tou snajperkou a ten den byla premiéra stvořitele v IMAXu a Denisa mě tam zvala. A já teď jako přemýšlím, ty vole, jako to bylo relativně jako čerstvě po rozchodu a já přemýšlím, ty vole, taky asi řeknu, že na to jako tady vychází ve Cyberpunk a tohle to. Ale jako to je takový jako hnusný, že už jsem řekl, že tam jako půjdu, jo, a nevěděl jsem o té snajperce. Tak jako ty nervní volám a říkám, hele, jako ono tady bude prostě event a bude tam snajperka a tohle to a já si myslím, že by to mohlo jako, a já si myslím, že asi to jako, já nevím, jestli bude ten film dobrý, já prostě se omlouvám, jo, v pohodě, jasný, ježišmarja, ale ten film jako, je mi to jedno. Ty vole, a pak prostě druhý den mi volá a říká, ten film byl fakt dobře, jestli nepřijel. Co ten stream, ten Cyberpunk? A já. Ten stream, absolutní cinema, datadisk, banger, jo a mimochodem 1500 subů za jediný večer a je to novej CZSK Hype Train Record. Tak asi dobrý rozhodnutí. Bodička.
And really seemed to think about what people like about the game and what they were left wanting. Character building feels more important and interesting with 2.0, and in general, the game is just...
Jo, ta 2.0 měla ještě jakoby fakt důležitý update, který píše týpek v chatu. Přidal ještě super důležitý update. Jakoby přidal super důležitou věc. Chápeš to? Toto automaticky povyšuje na nový level. To jsou nějaký další interakce ještě, jsem ani neviděl. Penem to dělá taky.
I couldn't ask for more. I'm picky about my girls. I couldn't ask for more.
Tak to už je absolutní cinema, tohle už je borderline prostě, tohle už je absolutně nerealistický, tohle už je vlhkej sen teritorium.
A lot more fun to actually play, which sounds like an obvious thing. Make the game more
na motorce,
fun.
to je strašná
But, I mean, that's
sračka
easier said than done, is it not? But the thing about 2.0 is that it was completely free. They
Free.
fulfilled their promise of fixing the game, and with Phantom Liberty, they went above and beyond. If there's any reason to play Cyberpunk, it's actually for Phantom Liberty, which is not just a fantastic expansion, it's easily in the running for the best game of the year. In a year as stacked as 2023, that is high praise.
Jako Phantom Liberty bylo hodně dobrý. Neřekl bych, že to byla nejlepší jako hra 2023, ale možná jsem byl trošku přejedenej toho základního Cyberpunku a pak jsem šel jako na ten datáč. Ale každopádně jako, nebo respektive takhle, moje očekávání bylo prostě o víně a krvi. Jo, to Phantom Liberty mělo na můj vkus prostě malou tu novou mapu. Byla prostě malá. Ten příběh hlavní byl úžasný, ty postavy boží, fakt jako jo, ale ta mapka byla malá.
Any issues the game originally had are just gone. Its story is fantastically paced. There's no dry scenes of exposition anymore. You're always going around doing something new, getting into other high-stakes situations or fighting some new enemy. It's both more exciting than the main game and more emotionally gripping. Idris Elba is fantastic as Solomon Reed, and Keanu Reeves steps it up as Johnny.
Idris Elba prostě, ty v každý, Idris se někam najmou a on, je. Teď ukážu, jak být nejvíc cool týpeček v místnosti.
Silverhand. He's good in the regular game,
plus on tam mají, on je i v tom soundtracku na to Phantom Liberty, on tam má vlastní songy, že jo.
It's got some great set piece moments and missions as well. I'd almost describe it as the best Call of Duty campaign Activision never made, because the story is so fast-paced and exciting, but that's selling Phantom Liberty short.
Hej, ta game is fixed. Jo. I vydali ten trailer a tam prostě the game is fixed. To si pamatuju, no, to byl jako dobrý kek. To bylo na konci, jo, to bylo na konci tohle traileru, že jo.
In 2077, how do you win when the deck is stacked against you? You go all in. In Night City, the rules are different. The stakes are higher. One wrong move is all it takes to get burned. If you want to hold the winning hand, you need to become stronger, faster, better. So who you know and who you can trust, that's the ace up your sleeve. The more you have, the more you stand to lose. So go ahead and play. Just don't forget, the game is fixed.
No, jako plus i ten cinematic trailer na to Phantom Liberty je absolutně skvělý. Ten myslím, že i vyhrál, že na těch Game Awards nejlepší trailer.
Can you hack the trap? Show me.
Měli to zmáknutý dobře, no.
It's $30 on top of the base game price, but in my opinion, the DLC makes the game so much more worth it. Even the side missions are great. It's set in a different district. It's called Dogtown. It's a section of the city that's been taken over by the mercenary company Barghest. The expansion, it just feels completely different from the standard game. Rather than your standard cyberpunk story about evil corporations, Phantom Liberty is more about the politics of the setting and revolves around themes of duty, patriotism, and freedom.
Wow, jak jako politics? Já nechci hrát žádný politický videohry. Co to je za woke sračku, ten Cyberpunk?
Narrative with a lot going on, and it pulls some of the most impressive tricks I've ever seen in a game by having two completely different ending missions depending on what decision you make. Both of these missions are absolutely fantastic and are worth experiencing regardless of what direction you want to take the story. They're as different as can be, while both being fully featured, story-heavy segments. They really make it feel like your choices matter in this one. And that's saying a lot.
Jako to jo, ale zase na druhou stranu já si myslím, že tohle to umějí i jináčí hry, třeba Casting of Frank Stone.
Happen in the end can change a lot, and they all feel like the true ending, if you get what I mean. There isn't corner cutting with this stuff. It's very impressive. The DLC starts off with your character being promised a solution to their problem, the problem they still have at the end of the damn main game, and the DLC actually ties into the main game pretty seamlessly in that way, and in the end, you fulfill your end of the bargain and actually get what you want. The DLC includes an entirely new ending for the base game, and it's one of the best endings I've ever seen in a game, no joke. You'd think that's where they'd stop, but they had a little bit more gas in the tank. In what is being described as the last major update to the game, Patch 2.1 will finally make it possible to ride the Metro system, something people have been complaining about for years. You can even ride it in real time if you want. You know how the game sold like 20 million units back in 2022? Post Phantom Liberty, you can bump that up to 25 million. All from the expansion and the 2.0 update. It took a while, but they finally pulled it off. The game is in a significantly better state now. And people seem overall happy with it. It's still not perfect, it's not the...
Jako víš co, ono to prodalo 20 milionů kopií a na ten fix a na Phantom Liberty tak přidali jako dalších 5. To je jako čtvrtina toho, co to prodalo. To není jako nic extra za 3 roky, není to jako žádná šílená částka tohle. Na druhou stranu na tom nepracoval celý tým. Ty už dělali preprodukci a zaklínače a tohle, že jo. Ale hlavně jim to prostě extrémně zlepší, nebo respektive zase jako získá tu perfektní reputaci toho CD Projektu. A jede ti prostě dál merch a legacy, stejně jako u Zaklínače 3, kde Zaklínač 3 prodal víc kopií v roce 2016, 17 a 18, než v roce 2015, kdy vyšel. Tudíž prostě ty můžeš po 5 letech říct, kamo Cyberpunk, banger. Lidi to zahrajou, koupí merch a až vyjde za bůh ví kolik let 2, budou na ní ready.
GTA, but in the future, some people wanted it to be back in 2020, but now some of the initial anger about the game has fallen into a memory hole. It's not hard to look back at a lot of the response from a few years ago and see it as overblown, a symptom of the gaming community's love of catastrophizing, but the game really did have a ton of problems back when it came out, and the company's practices leading up to the game's release were at very least questionable, possibly deceptive. Those investors that sued them actually got a payout of $1.85 million, which is a lot of money, although compared to the amount of money that the game...
Tak to jako... Shareholderi, akcionáři CD Projektu je teda žalovali a dohromady akcionáři dostali ani ne 50 milionů korun. Na hru, která první měsíc, díky tomu, že teda jako udělali tu kontroverzi a prodali to a fakt to vydali těsně před Vánocema covidu roku, prodala 15 milionů kopií. Já bych řekl, že to je jako ty vole pokuta, kde reálně ty vole někdo, kdo to odsouhlasil, ještě dostal prémie za to, že to nakonec pušli.
Game brought in probably not a lot of money, but even going beyond that, when it came to reviews, why were they that positive? What was going on there? It wasn't just the usual complaining that any highly anticipated game gets. There was fire with the smoke. It wasn't pretend. But to the developers' credit, they did manage to take that feedback and make a lot of positive changes to the game. It took nearly 3 years to do it, but they managed to make Cyberpunk 2077, which was the laughingstock of the gaming industry for quite a while, into a great game. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like...
Krásný comeback story. Jako... Potom Zaklínači a tomhle tom, jako je to hezký, že to nakonec dotáhnuli na tuhle úroveň. Tohle všechno je v Cyberpunku. POV fotorealismus, jo, to jsem viděl, tohle je absolutně insane, jak to, už jenom ten začátek, jo. Tady lidi píšou, já jsem si myslel, že to je nějaký cosplay. Tam prostě lidi v komentářích píšou, já myslel, že to je nějaký cosplay, jo. Že to je prostě natáčený doma někde na GoPro. A teď ti lidi píšou, jak dlouho jim to trvalo, než zjistili, že to je hra. Jo, tady už to je jasný, ale... Tady třeba ne úplně. A vlastně, jakoby, když jsme dnešní stream začali Danovým článkem, jaký hry mě serou, nebo který mi přijdou nadhodnocený, tak zrovna Cyberpunk Daniel Vávra už v výběhem vydání v prosinci 2020 chválil a psal, že to má nejhezčí ty vole automobilový interiéry, který kdy viděl v AAA hře, že na jeho projektoru a na jeho PC se staví za 250 000, to vypadá absolutně jako totální cinema a že konzolisti jsou... Tam někde část, kde to prší? Kde prší? Tohle vypadá dobře. O můj bože. Krásné to mají, kucí. To je 7 měsíců zpátky, co je tady z toho? Hyperrealistic, to je 2 týdny zpátky. Moc hezké. Chudák Tereza Borůvková hraje casting of Frank Stone, kámo. Nevím, proč nikdo neřekl ty vole, ať to nepouští.